Have you ever stopped to think about the one invisible rule that connects pretty much every piece of music you've ever heard? It turns out there's a secret number, a hidden standard, that governs our whole musical world. So let's pull back the curtain on music's magic number.
So, what is it? I mean, you might think it's a particular instrument or maybe a specific chord progression that they all use, but nope, the real answer is something way more fundamental. It's almost like a ghost in the machine of all modern music. And here it is. The answer is just a number, 440, or to be more specific, 440 hertz. This one single frequency, it's the international standard for tuning. It's the bedrock, right? The foundation for basically everything. Symphonies, rock anthems, pop hits. So what does that actually mean? Okay, to really get what 440 is all about, we gotta talk about pitch first. It's pretty simple, really. When you hear a high note versus a low note, what your brain is actually processing is the frequency of a sound wave. The faster it vibrates, the higher the pitch sounds to you.
And the way we measure that frequency? That's hertz. So when we say 440 hertz, it literally means a sound wave is vibrating back and forth 440 times every single second. It's the cold, hard number behind a very specific musical sound. Now, this standard isn't for every note. It's for one very specific note, the A that's right above middle C on a piano. You'll hear musicians call it A4. And here's the key. Once you get that one note vibrating at exactly 440 times a second, every other note on the instrument is tuned based on that. It's the anchor for the whole system. But, it wasn't always this neat and tidy. Before everyone agreed on 440, the music world was, well, to put it nicely, it was a mess. A total mess. And that musical chaos is exactly why they so desperately needed a standard in the first place. And what's so wild about this is just how huge the range was. I mean, just try to imagine this. One orchestra's tunes to a frequency that's almost a whole note lower than the orchestra in the next town over. So the same note, A, written on paper, could sound completely different depending on where you were standing. Crazy, right?
And this wasn't just some abstract academic problem. No way. An oboe that was perfectly in tune in Paris would sound just painfully out of tune in Vienna. A singer trained in one city might find the music in another place way too high or low to even sing properly. It made everything, from building instruments to just playing music together, a complete logistical nightmare. So naturally, a movement started to try and fix this. But the journey to find that one single universal pitch, wow, it was a long and winding road. We're talking a debate that went on for over 100 years, pulling in scientists, governments, musicians, everybody from all over the world.
Yeah, as you can see, this was not a quick decision. The idea of 440 hertz was actually thrown out there way back in 1834. But for decades, all these different standards were fighting for the top spot. France had its own thing going with 435 hertz, which got pretty popular, but America started leaning toward 440. It all finally came to a head at this one really important conference in London back in 1939. Okay, and this is where the story gets really good, because the final showdown wasn't between a bunch of different frequencies all over the map. Nope. It came down to two numbers that were almost identical, 440 and its biggest rival, 439. So get this, the British were hosting the conference, and they'd been using 439 hertz as their standard for 40 years. It was totally established, it worked just fine. So why on earth would they even bother making that tiny little jump up to 440? And this slide really gets to the heart of the debate. See, 439, it's a prime number. Mathematically, that makes it kind of awkward to work with. But 440, super easy to divide. Now, that might sound like a tiny, nerdy detail, but with all the new electronic tech popping up at the time, it made all the difference in the world. And here it is. This is the big aha moment. The winning argument had nothing to do with music theory or acoustics. It came from an engineer. An engineer who basically stood up and said, look, with the technology we have right now, it's just plain easier to create a stable 440 hertz signal than it is to create a 439 one. So in the end, it was all about practicality. Think about it. The conference was held at the BBC headquarters, a giant in broadcasting. They needed a reference tone that was stable and super easy to create electronically for their broadcasts. And for that, well, 440 was just the better number for the job. Simple as that. But here's the thing. Even after 440 was crowned the international standard, the story doesn't just end there. Not at all. that debate is actually still going on in concert halls all over the world, even today. Yeah, just take a look at this. Even though 440 is the official standard, a lot of top orchestras do their own thing. Many European orchestras, for instance, tune a little higher to 442 Hz because they like that brighter sound. And then you have groups that play Baroque music on old school instruments. They tune way down to 415 Hz to be historically accurate. So you see these numbers like 90 cents. What does that even mean? Well, think about a piano. The smallest step you can take is from one key to the very next one, right? Like from C to C sharp. That's called a semitone. Musicians divide that tiny distance into 100 even smaller bits called cents. It's just a way to measure really, really small differences in pitch. What this means is that the difference between our modern standard and that old Baroque standard is huge. It's almost a full semitone. So the note we call A today would have sounded much more like an A sharp to a musician living back in box time. Totally different feel. So to break it down, A equals 440 is pretty much king in most popular music, and for most orchestras in the US and the UK. But if you listen really closely to a German orchestra, you might just hear that slightly brighter A equals 442. Go to a Baroque concert and you'll hear that much warmer, lower A equals 415. And a fun fact, if you ever need a perfect reference tone, the US time station WWV has been broadcasting a perfect 440 Hz tone on the hour, every hour since 1936. So, what's the big takeaway here? It's that 440 Hz isn't some magical perfect number that we discovered in nature. Not at all. It was a compromise. It was a practical fix that came out of 100 years of total chaos, a weird little tech battle between a prime number and an even one, and of course, the needs of the brand new broadcasting era. And that leaves us with a really fascinating question, doesn't it? The standard we use every day is totally a product of its time. So what if we held that big international conference today? With all our modern tech and our global culture, what would we choose? What would matter most? The art? The science? The practicality? What would guide our decision for the sound of the future?